everyone. My name is Carly Robinson, and I will be moderating this panel of impressive women tonight. Just to introduce myself first, I am a software engineer at Slack. I went to Hackbright, same cohort actually as Carolyn over here. I'm excited to get this panel started and hear everyone here has amazing stories. So I'd like to start out just going and let's go down the line, and if you could introduce yourself, tell us where you've worked as a software engineer, what coding boot camp you went to, and maybe what you were doing before you decided to go to a coding boot camp. And let's start with Madeline.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline, and I'm a software engineer at Pinterest. I work primarily on our mobile side, so on Android, but sometimes cross-platform on React Native. And I majored in economics in college. I went to Binghamton University in upstate New York, and I decided to become a software engineer right afterwards. So I graduated, I found a fellowship program called Coalition for Queens, and started officially coding 2 months after graduating from college. And I've been at Pinterest for 2.5 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Gabby Andrade. I'm a software engineer at DoorDash. I just recently joined. Before that, I was an engineer at Intuit. And at DoorDash now, I work on the merchant team on the front end side, so building tools for the restaurants that we partner with. Before DoorDash, I was doing a couple different jobs as a marketing associate, as a data analyst. I studied economics and international relations in college and tried a bunch of different things after school until I realized that I really liked coding. And after I realized that, I looked into boot camps and came across Hackbright. And so that's the one I did, and Hackbright's here in San Francisco.
Thank you. Oh no. Technical difficulties. You good?
Hello?
There we go, yeah.
I promise I actually know how to use technology. So yeah, my name's Carolyn. As Carly said, I was in Hackbright with her in 2015, and I am currently a software engineer at Lyft. I've been there about a year. I'm building machine learning systems for user acquisition. So like getting more drivers is essentially the goal. Before that, I worked at a startup for 2 years, also doing user acquisition stuff, but specifically focused on referrals. And so before I got into engineering, I ended up doing Hackbright directly out of undergrad. And so like my whole background was in linguistics, and I had worked in research, and then sort of was forced into some computational linguistics and realized that like the computational piece really spoke to me. So that's how I got interested in coding, and now here I am.
Not working. Cool. Cool. So hi, my name is Christine. I went to App Academy this time last year. I graduated in January. And for 6 months after that, I was working at App Academy as a technical admission specialist. So I was interviewing people just like you, trying to get into App Academy. I was also teaching some of their intro classes, and right now I work as a server engineer at Postmates. Funnily enough, I also work on the merchant team. I studied philosophy and economics in college.
Hi, my name is Abby, and a year ago I was hoping to become a software engineer. I had studied American Sign Language interpreting in college and worked a number of jobs. And in November of last year, I quit my full-time job and went to Lambda School, which many people here know. Yay, one person has heard of. So I finished the program in May of this year, and I am now almost at 4 months at my current job, which is being a software engineer at Nordstrom up in Seattle, Washington, which is where I live. And I love it. It was great. Highly recommend. But I work on their mobile app, so I create their iPhone app, work entirely in Swift, which is not the language that my coding bootcamp taught me.
Great. Thank you. And then,
Yes. So, hi, I'm Kira Hernandez. I am not a software engineer. I have never attended a coding bootcamp, but I have worked in the industry for about 5 years since it was just getting started. I currently work with Trilogy Education Services, which is the organization that powers many boot camps affiliated with universities that you've probably heard of, like the Berkeley Coding Bootcamp, Northwestern Coding Bootcamp, the Rutgers Coding Bootcamp, Columbia Engineering Coding Bootcamp, the list goes on. We have partners all across the country and around the world. As I mentioned, I've been in the industry for about 5 years. I started off at Hack Reactor, also worked with Rhythm School here in San Francisco for a bit, and most recently have been with Trilogy. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, though I did live here in San Francisco for a bit and then in Oakland for about 4 years, so recent relocation to Atlanta. I went to school for anthropology and Spanish linguistics. And my first job out of college was in a language immersion program. And when I moved out to the Bay Area, I was exposed to this new idea of couldn't we immerse people in technology and teach them, coding really quickly, teach them all these different technology concepts really quickly and help accelerate their careers and accelerate the workforce. And I thought that was a super cool idea. And I've been working on the career services side of bootcamp programs ever since, and I love it.
awesome. Thank you so much. And then we have a late joiner to, this is,
Hi everyone, I'm sorry for running a little bit late, could not find parking on time. My name is Kriti Parashar and I'm representing App Academy here. Christine is one of our former students. At App Academy, I manage all of the student-facing aspects, so everything from selection to instruction to curriculum to placement and then corporate partnerships in order to place our students. As you know, App Academy has a post-paid model, which is, we sort of put our money on the students and say, we won't charge you a penny unless you find a job. So student success is very important to us, and that is my ultimate success metric, is making sure all of the students do get placed after they've attended the program. I've been in higher education for about 10 years now in various roles. I studied economics in undergrad back in India, and then came to the US for my MBA, and then have been managing different programs across different companies, but in the higher education space. So happy to talk about other alternate higher education options as well, if that is of interest, but here representing App Academy.
great, thank you so much. Cool, so to kick off this panel, given this is themed how to choose a coding bootcamp, first question I am curious to hear from is if we could just, in a quick, I think it'd be interesting to hear all of you answer this a little bit, but why did you decide to attend a coding boot camp? And maybe just a short bit about why did you start teaching yourself how to code? Like, how did that happen? Do you want to start? Oh, there you go.
Is this on?
Oh, great. Perfect.
So, like many people in this room, I went to a coding boot camp because I knew that I wanted to be a software engineer. I knew that because I took time to speak with people who are working in the industry at different jobs, people who worked as product or project managers, people who worked as developers, people who worked on the business aspect of it. I started teaching myself how to code. I took a class at my local community college. I signed up for free code camp and went through their curriculum. So I had a pretty good understanding before I went to my boot camp that this was what I wanted to do. I highly recommend doing something to educate yourself along the same vein if that's something that you think might be the right call for you.
How did you decide on Lambda School?
So I had looked at a number of different boot camps. I had even applied to other boot camps. I had been rejected 3 times from one boot camp, and I had been so set on this one way to get there. that I hadn't really considered that there were alternative options. And I was going to meetups. I went to a hackathon and I started speaking with a developer who said, have you heard of this thing, Lambda School? It's a new thing. They don't charge you anything up front. They only charge you if you get a job in the field. And I hadn't really heard of that before. So I started doing research, and a lot of it aligned with things that I wanted for myself. So that's how I chose Lambda ultimately.
Thank you. Christine.
Cool. So I'm going to be honest with you guys. I did not really know I wanted to be an engineer when I first started this coding journey. When I was in college, I worked pretty much full-time all summers and half-times during school as a waitress at several different restaurants. Ended up working in management positions. But working as a waitress, you know, like, it gets tiring with all the manual work, and I just didn't want to do it anymore, and I kind of wanted to, like, use my brain for something. So majoring in philosophy, my emphasis was in logic, and I was like, I didn't know, like, I could do anything with, like, my major in logic. I thought, like, I had applied to Tesla to be, like, an ethics advisor, which is what they were looking for out of philosophy majors. I didn't want to go to law school. It wasn't something I was interested in. And so, like, in some of my senior classes, I took advanced logic, and in my classes, there were comp sci majors and cog sci majors, and I was asking them, like, what are you guys doing here? Like, why are you guys taking logic classes? And they were like, oh, like, everything you can do in computer science based off, like, very basic logic, like simple logic gates. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can use my major for something? Like, you laugh now, but, like, I think my counselor, as a joke, had given us McDonald's applications. Like, look, if you're not gonna go to law school, the restaurant industry is where it's at. And I didn't want that life for myself. So I threw myself into coding. I threw my life savings into moving to San Francisco. And honestly, like, it has been, like, the best. I'm, like, lucky enough that I love the job that I do. And I think that, like, people sometimes make the mistake of, like, especially coding boot camps where you don't pay up front and you pay after the fact. No one understands that it's such a huge, like, financial, it's a financial investment, and no one understands the gravity of that situation until you graduated coding boot camp and you're like, oh crap, what if I don't want to be an engineer? Now I owe this boot camp so much money. So I definitely recommend, like, knowing exactly what it is that you want out of life, knowing what, like, the industry is expecting of you. But if you're lucky like me and you didn't put much thought into it and everything just kind of worked out, go you. But you never know. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
Thank you. That's awesome.
So I guess I was sort of in between these paths. I had done some coding. So as I said, I'd been studying linguistics and had to learn enough coding to, like, be able to get the homeworks in. And I was not good at it, but realized that, like, despite how much I hated struggling, I actually, like, really liked the coding itself. And so I was, like, in that fearful period of undergrad where you're, like, approaching May of your senior year and don't know what you're gonna do. And, like, the panic is setting in because I realized I didn't really want to do research full time anymore, but didn't really have a backup. And so, like, really the, like, number one thing I was thinking at the time was, like, just let me be brave enough to do it now before I chicken out. And yeah, I picked Hackbright mostly because I knew I wanted to be in San Francisco. My then boyfriend, but now husband, was out here. And the other piece was that it's all women. And that was, like, an environment that I thought would be really, really just, like, suitable to my temperament, and it wasn't an experience I'd had before. And so, like, that really narrowed down the options a lot. And I think it worked out really well.
I kind of stumbled upon coding in my last job. I was a data analyst, and I was asked to look at our online analytics information for our websites, and I didn't know really anything about analytics, but I made some recommendations after learning some on my own for ways to kind of improve the experience, and then I got interested in making some of those changes on my own. They didn't have the developer bandwidth internally to implement some of those changes, so I was like, how hard can this be? Let me try to do it on my own. So I started teaching myself how to code, and then getting them to give me more and more responsibility as time went on, and it worked. And I realized that I really liked coding that way. I took a part-time front-end development class to see if I wanted to commit to quitting my job and doing this full-time. So I did that at General Assembly. And then after researching boot camps, I came across Hackbright, and I, like many other people, really liked the women aspect of it, the women-only aspect, I mean. And I felt like that was going to be the best learning environment for me. And so that's why I chose Hackbright.
Thank you. Madeline.
Hello? Okay, this works. Great. So I was an economics major, and while I was in school, I had a few really cool internships. Like I interned at JP Morgan and did a rotational program, and then I interned at a huge nonprofit doing like budget management for them, and they were doing great work. I was pretty happy, but unfulfilled, I guess. So my senior year, I was just like, I'm not ready for the real world. Like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know, I haven't seen enough of the world to actually make a decision like this. So I went abroad, and when I went abroad, there I met some women who were software engineers. And I had never met anyone who was a software engineer before that, especially not a woman. Maybe I knew some men, but they didn't talk about it. So I didn't know what coding was. And when I met them, I kind of got curious. And I think there were Code Academy's ads, which you probably have all seen, were everywhere around that time, like Learn to Code, sign on to Code Academy. They were everywhere. So I just, like, when I met them, I got curious about what they were doing, and I just signed on to Code Academy and started doing some stuff. And then I realized I was doing HTML and CSS on Code Academy. And I don't know how many of you, I think some of you probably use MySpace. How many of you use MySpace? Okay. So when I signed on to Code Academy, I made the connection between MySpace and what I was doing there and coding. And then I realized, like, people were being paid to, like, do this stuff that we all did for fun when we were like 15 or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'll just follow this path. And I kept teaching myself nights and weekends after class. And then I went into the real world, and I got a job in public relations and marketing in New York. And that made me realize, like, I do not want to be in an industry where they kind of stick to the status quo and do things as they've always done them, because this sucks. I want to be in an industry that's, like, moving forward fast, that's adopting new technologies and is building them. And so I kept teaching myself nights and weekends. Then I left my job. I found a fellowship program that was free, and that was my criteria. I just needed something that was free and kind of part-time. So I went nights and weekends. So I would work, and then I would go to the program. And I didn't have a free day, but it was okay because I had a goal. But yeah, so that was kind of my journey, and my program is Coalition for Queens in New York. Right now it goes by the name Pursuit, and back then it was completely free, so I didn't pay a penny, but now it's like you also pay after you graduate and get a job.
Thank you. It's funny you mentioned those Code Academy ads, because that was definitely what I saw when I first was starting to code. I remember vividly scrolling on Facebook and seeing an ad for Code Academy and being like, I could do that. Like, and that's, so that is a really great place to start. But getting back to coding boot camps, one thing I'm curious about, as we've all completed our coding boot camps now, is like, what are some of the things that when you chose a coding boot camp, and as you were going through it, maybe what was something you didn't expect about how it was done? Abby?
Sure. So I think there's a lot to consider when you're looking at coding boot camps. You are choosing them just as much as they are choosing you. So ask for information. Ask to speak with anyone who works there, and there are certain things that I considered that may be helpful to you, so I'll share them. So when you look at different coding boot camps, they all have different tracks. Some will be, my coding boot camp was full stack JavaScript and some Python. You might see some that are mobile oriented. You might see some that are front end oriented. And you might not know, like I didn't know what kind of software engineer I wanted to be. And that's okay. But something to consider is if someone purports to teach you 5 full languages in 4 months, I would raise an eyebrow at that. Not to say it can't be done, but for me, the choice that I wanted was to really dive into one language and build a foundation on that, because once you have a foundational knowledge in something, you can build off of that. So like I said, I studied full stack JavaScript. I work in Swift now, but I had the knowledge there. So consider what you want to do. If you already know, pursue it. If you don't know, educate yourself, dive deep, and as you do a coding bootcamp, figure out what it is you want to do and pursue it. I started taking mobile development classes at the same time I was in my bootcamp. I started going on Udacity and learning about mobile development. I had the privilege to be able to do that because I had a support network, and I had a lot of privileges while I went there, and I recognized that. So also, you need to consider your time, your financial situation. Can you afford to pay tuition up front? I couldn't, but maybe some people here can. So knowing what you can afford helps you to look at the different programs out there. There are scholarships available. You should look into them. My program, Lambda School, is an income sharing program. So I paid nothing up front, and now that I have a job in the computer science field that pays me a certain dollar amount, I now share a percentage of my income with my boot camp. So that means that their goals are aligned with mine. I wanted to get a job in the field, and they wanted me to do so as well. Look at their success rates. They're going to give you statistics. Push back. If they say we have a 95% placement rate, ask them, does that include part-time? Does that include internships? Are you including everyone who started the program, or are you only considering the graduates? Make sure that you're diving deep and doing your due diligence, and make sure that the company that you are going to be doing business with has values that align with your own.
Thank you. That was great. So once you're at the boot camp, it can be, it moves really fast, and it can be really overwhelming at times. I'm curious to hear from some of you, like, when things get really hard, what was the hardest part of your boot camp, and how did you keep yourself motivated when it got really hard? Christine?
So, as you all know, I jumped into this with very little preparation. So when I was at my coding bootcamp, like the hardest part of going through it was not having enough context. Like I didn't really know what software engineers did. All I knew was that I liked solving the puzzles and I was good at it. So after going through the program and like having to go back over the program twice more, it's something that I always told to like the students that came to me after, like while they were applying to bootcamp, is that like imagine you're in a shop class and they're telling you like, hey, you're gonna build a screwdriver. You don't know what the screwdriver is used for, but you have like a metal rod, you have like 4 rivets at the end, and they're always telling you like, oh, you cut the rivets at like 1 millimeter wide. But if you never know what exactly that screwdriver is used for, which is to like, put it on the tips of like screws and like to screw them in, you don't know that it like matters, like how deep the rivets are. You don't know like what the point of a screwdriver is. You're never gonna know like you're never gonna be good at making screwdrivers, right? So like the thing is like, being at a boot camp, there's no time to be shy. Like I don't care, like, I was that person who was always asking the stupid questions like, oh, why are we learning this? Like, what are we gonna use it for? Like, it didn't matter because to know that context is the best way to get through it. And in terms of motivation, like, I think it's so, like, when you're in it, it becomes your entire life. Like, you learn how to code, you learn two languages within the span of 3 months. It's an insane amount of like information taken within like a very short period of time. It's so hard. Like this is something that we always see at App Academy is that you don't remember the person you were before you came here, and it's so true. Like your life is so different before and after App Academy. And so in terms of motivation, like everyone says, misery loves company. I had so much fun like with my friends, just like, oh my God, what are we doing? I've been working for like 90 to 100-hour weeks. Definitely true. But like, you gotta really want it. Like, you gotta like know what it is that you want out of this. Don't go into it half-hearted, because you're gonna feel worse if you end up like leaving the boot camp. So really just like take the time. Don't be afraid to like ask questions. Always ask why. Find out what it is that like what you're learning is used for. Because the only way you're gonna be a good engineer, it isn't rote memorization. It isn't like, oh, this method does this. It's none of that. It's about pattern recognition. It's about knowing what it is that you're doing, seeing the big picture, and like being able to implement that.
That was amazing. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I totally agree about asking questions. We actually have pretty similar backgrounds. I don't know if you knew this, but so Christine, you studied like screenwriting and did production for a bit too in LA. So she has a really cool background. I did theater, and when you're coming at it from a non-technical background, it can be really intimidating to be in, to ask questions, because you're like, is this a stupid question? I don't know. But like, just throw that out. It's so, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for context. 100%. So next question. So let's talk about maybe some of the things you wish that you had learned from your coding bootcamp that they didn't teach you. Carolyn?
Sure. So, I think one thing that I really did like about Hackbright was like it taught me the actual skills I was going to need when I was working in my job. And what I wish I had learned more of is like the skills I would need to get the job, because I discovered somewhat after the fact that they're like really, really different skills. So the job I ended up getting, it was at a startup, and I think part of the reason I was able to land it was because the interview process was really unconventional. They gave me a take-home problem, and I sort of worked through it, and then I went in and talked with them sort of through a design problem, and then I actually got to work with them for a week so they could see like if I can contribute or not before they hired me. The 99% of the other places I interviewed at have a more standard coding interview. And so you get asked, computer science 101 questions that like I had never learned. And so I think sort of different boot camps have different flavors. And I went in 2015, and it's probably changed worlds since then. But I wish there had been like more of a focus on like the specific like algorithms and data structures that I was gonna need to know like just to like get my foot in the door, so that people would see like, yes, she has these algorithms and data structures skills, and like therefore we can hire her to like build our website, which is certainly not the same thing, but like both are useful and both can be challenging to learn on your own.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. You kind of started touching on like the job search process. I'm curious, like one of my next questions here is like, what was the job search process like when you left? I don't know if Gabby, if you want to talk a little bit about your job hunt.
Sure. So Hackbright at the time had partner companies that they worked with. And so they came to interview everyone in the class. And it was, I think, about like 30 companies to 20-something women. And it was the most stressful day that I had had in like 10 years because we basically had to be interviewed by like companies and like 30 companies over the course of like 4 hours, and you always have to be on and talking about yourself and your project. But one great thing that came out of that was that I got interviews at a couple of places and 2 offers from the company that I ended up working at, Intuit, and another startup. So I ended up being there. I was very fortunate, I think, to have had that experience. A lot of my peers did not. I know it was a very stressful experience for them. It was stressful for me too in those that month that I was interviewing. But I know that experience can be very different. You can be interviewing for like 2 days, which did happen to like one of my peers got a job like immediately out of the boot camp. And then some people were in the job market for like 6-8 months. And so it can vary a lot. I was very fortunate. And so I had that experience right out of Hackbright, and then I worked at Intuit for 2.5 years, and then most recently went through my job search again, and I can say that was totally different than after my boot camp. I felt so much better prepared at that point, and a big reason why was because of the peer network that I had from Hackbright, and it made a huge difference. Like, so many of my friends helped me get referrals, also helped me when I was interviewing and preparing. We had like a little like code club that we would go to every week and just like prepare for interviews together. So that second time around, that network really, really helped. So I would also encourage you guys to, look into how strong that network is that you're going to be joining, and definitely lean on it. Talk to some people that went to the boot camp and see how responsive they are to helping you, because it may not help after your first job, but it definitely will for your second job.
Thank you. Maddie, so we have two Android and iOS people, right? You're doing iOS. And your coding bootcamp specified like mostly Android, right? I'm curious, like, is there anything, in general and about your coding bootcamp, like, that you wish they taught you that they didn't, or did you feel prepared to kind of like go into anything?
Yeah. Okay, so I started my job search process like way before I graduated from my boot camp. I started at the 6-month mark. So my boot camp was 10 months long, and it was nights and weekends. And I started my job search process at 6 months, and I was able to get an apprenticeship like right away. I submitted a coding challenge for an internship at Venmo, and I didn't get that. But then I asked for feedback, and they gave me feedback, and I worked off of that to get the second interview at another company a month later, and I had a job like 3 months before, or 4 months before I graduated. So I was never like unemployed. There were things that I wish they had taught me, but I'll be honest with you, my program wasn't very popular. There wasn't a lot of information on it at the time. They were really small. We were the first official class. We had a teacher, and then we lost her like 12 weeks in. So it was really hard, honestly. Like, it was just me and my friends who were super dedicated, and we had a curriculum to follow, and we had to get help with lessons, and we taught ourselves. And that's basically what it was. It was like, in order to be an Android engineer, you need to know all of these things. Here's like some bullet points on them, go look them up. And so we learned on our own time. Some things that I wish maybe I would have learned if we had like a dedicated teacher was probably navigating a code base, like a foreign, humongous code base. Because when I came to Pinterest, that was kind of the hardest thing. Like, how do I find the things that I need without bugging someone every 2 seconds? Yeah, but besides that, I felt pretty prepared. I think the main thing that your bootcamp has to offer you is like project-based learning, where you're always working in a group and you're committing to GitHub, the opportunity to like actually build stuff and not just read textbooks, but also you should supplement your learning with textbooks. And anything that's like a black hole, you should kind of look up on YouTube. And it might take you a little bit longer to grasp some concepts. That's totally normal. Your bootcamp is going to teach you in one way, and not everybody learns in the exact same way. So there were like some video lectures that they would put up that made absolutely no sense to me. So I would just not sleep and watch video lectures and read textbooks and like really reinforce what I was supposed to be learning through video lectures, because we didn't have a teacher again. So overall, I think the main thing is to always be building things. If you're in a bootcamp, like, you should always be building things. And the rest will come with time. When you get a job, there's gonna be someone there that can teach you or fill in the gaps that you don't know the answers to. And at first, you're gonna be so scared to ask anybody any questions. You're just gonna be like, I suck, I don't know anything, they're gonna figure me out. But then you'll see like this really cool person join your company and she asks all the questions, but everybody respects her because of that, because she asks everything that's on her mind and she's like ready to go. And then you learn like, I should ask a question when I have a question. Like there's no such thing as a stupid question, and it'll just accelerate my learning. So yeah, overall I think I wish I had that one thing, like I had known how to navigate a huge code base because it was intimidating.
Totally. I mean, thank you. That was an awesome answer. And super inspiring. I didn't realize that, I mean, the fact that you guys kept teaching yourselves after you lost your teachers were pretty amazing. And I also agree about navigating a code base. That I think that was probably the most challenging. Like I felt very prepared for everything except for that. Like, I had to learn like just how to use my like search tools and navigate, like use grep and basic command line things. So before we get to our industry experts, I have one more question for the panelists, and that's about transferable skills. Are there any? I'm just curious, like, are there any unexpected transferable skills you've brought from what you were doing previously that you found useful as an engineer? And try to make it. I don't, how much time do we have? We're running a bit behind, but just Carolyn, and then maybe Christine, because I feel like you have like non-traditional background.
Sure thing. So, as I said, I was doing linguistics before. Specifically, it involved like looking at word lists from different languages and trying to figure out what older versions of the language looked like. And so, like, I think the biggest transferable skill I had was like being able to build a mental model of like what might be going on, and then like as you learn more, reevaluating your assumptions and like being willing to be like, no, maybe what I thought is wrong, and like approach it from a different direction. I think it's very easy in engineering to get stuck and be like, there's no way that this error is happening, or like there's no way that it's like not behaving the way it should, and just like the humility to like reevaluate and like approach it from a different angle and think like maybe no, it's actually structured this way. That like got me much farther than I think I expected to go.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think we have time for everybody, but
Sure.
let's see.
So it's not so much that like my background was so not technical that I didn't have any skills to transfer it over in a technical way, but when it came to job search, like working as a waitress, and like Carly said, after stalking my LinkedIn, I worked as a producer and a screenwriter for a company that my friends and I had founded. It was a production company, and I like learned how to talk to people. I knew how to like make my customers laugh. I knew how to, because I wanted tip, like I knew how to make them like me. And in terms of like working in like the film industry, like you have to put that face on. You have to really like sell yourself. It's really about like the people you know. And that really transferred over in like my job search. Like I also spent like 6 months interviewing candidates for App Academy, and the thing like, a lot of people can solve these questions, but the question that I'm asking myself when I see these people is, do I want to work with you for 40 plus hours a week? Like, because at App Academy we spend what, 90 to 100 hours working, 50 hours like together. Like App Academy does a really good job at like selecting students that all get along really well. Like my entire cohort, like we're all really close. But that's the thing, like, do you want to be around these people for like 40 hours a week? Like when I was interviewing at like companies, that was like what I was trying to show them. Like, look, I know that I'm here, I'm on my on-site. You guys know I can code. If I'm not making enormous mistakes, like what I want you to see is like, you're gonna wanna hang out with me. Like, you're gonna wanna work with me. You're like, I'm good at communicating my thoughts. I'm good at like communicating my thought process. I'm not going to let you down. And like, that is really like what I brought from, especially like the 5-6 years of like waiting tables, was just like, they're people, like they're not there to like, oh my God, she made one mistake. She left a semicolon out in like JavaScript. Who does that?
Yeah.
No one cares about that. It's about just making them want to be around you.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, thank you. But like communication skills are huge also as an engineer. And but I want to keep going so we can get to Abby.
I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
Track everything. Show that you are data driven. I don't care if you're waiting tables. How many tables did you wait? How many tables did you wait the next month? Is there an improvement? Can you track that performance? If you work in retail, how many customers have you worked with? Do you have return customers? What can you track about what you're doing now that can show that you care deeply about data? Because that's something we all work with every day, is tracking performance and increasing that tracking.
Thank you. Do you guys want to go real quick? Let's like maybe like 2 sentences.
Okay.
I know.
I mentioned I had a couple different jobs before, and I always had to teach myself new things because it was at a really small company where they didn't know. So, I was always Googling things, I was YouTubing things, I was finding courses. So those skills that I had to make in order to teach myself things definitely transferred to being an engineer, because that's what you're doing every day, is you're teaching yourself things.
Awesome. Great job being concise.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. Just like teach yourself, learn how to learn, learn how you learn, and also just like stay really positive. Like, don't think about what they're going to think about you. Don't think about how terrible it might be. Just think about everything as a learning experience and stay positive. Like, if I don't get this job, it's cool. I'll learn from them or something. Like, I'll get free food, whatever. Like, just be positive and like, don't worry about the outcome. Just focus on like learning and growing every day.
Thank you. That was awesome. Now I'd like to switch over to Kira and Kriti. Especially like the coding bootcamp industry has changed and grown a lot since like Carolyn and I went back, I think back in 2015. I'm just curious, like, how in your eyes has the coding bootcamp industry changed in the last 5 years?
Well, to start with, people know what coding bootcamps are, which I think is an important piece. Definitely here in the Bay Area, I think they're more, in major metro areas around the United States, they're more known than they are in some other places. But when I started in the industry, close to 5 years ago, a lot of my calls with potential employer partners were starting off with explaining to them like what we were doing and how it worked. And no, it's not an accelerated computer science degree. It's similar, but also different, and like having a lot of conversations like that. Now, when we get on the phone with employers, potential partners, we don't have to tell them what a coding bootcamp is, right? They have that part down. I think one of the, there are pros and cons to that, right? So we've seen that over the past year, the industry has continued to expand, but also consolidated in some areas, right? Like, we've lost some major players in the market, we've gained some new ones, which I think is normal for any growing industry. But I think generally there's been a net positive in that there are more programs, there's more accessibility, there's more funding, there's more diversity in areas of study, right? It's not just coding bootcamps anymore, it's not just JavaScript. You can do data analytics, you can do UX UI, you can go to a bootcamp for product management. There are actually all these different career paths with this accelerated learning model that you can explore, and I think that part of it is really awesome. Of course, there are some companies that we still hear today will say like, oh, I don't hire bootcamp grads. Well, it's like, well, then good luck filling your jobs in 5 years. It's going to go really well. So basically, I think employers are much more open to it. People are changing their hiring practices to support hiring engineers that do not have a computer science degree or a STEM degree. And it's just becoming much more mainstream. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the thing that I would focus on most over the past 5 years is the focus on quality. So if you look at the boot camps that existed and were top of market 5 years ago, a lot of them don't exist at the moment because they didn't have that quality education. Dev Bootcamp, Iron Yard, you see a few of the major examples of boot camps that ceased to exist because they did not really prove the model that they were advocating, right? So it is important to look at which boot camps have been in the industry the longest, which boot camps have the kinds of outcomes that they preach. So yeah, I think that would be my biggest sort of takeaway over the past 5 years, of the focus in quality. Second, I would say, App Academy was one of the first to have this kind of post-paid model, but then we've kind of realized as an industry that we have to put our money where our mouth is, and so we see a lot of other boot camps following suit, and so a lot of now boot camps have that post-paid model in order to ensure that they have that focus on quality.
Thank you. So I think that we have some time now to start opening up Q&A to the audience. So do we have any questions here for any of the panelists? Yes.
Hi. Throughout your whole process, did you have a mentor or did you find a mentor that could help guide you, especially someone who is already a female in this space, that could really help guide you either through boot camp initially or immediately after throughout the initial job search?
Thank you. Yes.
I'm taking this one because I have really strong feelings about mentorship. I think that mentorship is crucial. I think you should never ask anyone to be your mentor. Just let them be your mentor. If you have a question, reach out to someone. I certainly did. I spoke to, even before I went to boot camps, I asked people who graduated. I asked specifically women who graduated from the boot camps I was interested in about their experiences. I reached out to women who were working in the industry to ask them about the companies they worked at, about the roles they worked in. But the fastest way to get someone to run away from you, especially a woman in tech, is to ask her to be your mentor. It's terrifying. But treat people as your mentors, and don't look for one person to be everything you need in a mentor. You've got this huge community around you. Make use of it, and you'll find your mentors.
Thank you. Thank you, yeah. Perhaps everybody. So it's interesting you say that, because I actually had the opposite experience. I ask people to be my mentors all the time. And they took my calls. I've asked so many people at Slack even just to mentor me, people who I have, who are more senior than me, who've been there longer. I just was like, hey, I don't know if you're open to this, but I think you're a really great engineer. Would you be open to mentoring me? Maybe we could meet once a month and just pair and ask questions. I'll learn from you, whatever. And I have a handful. I have so many mentors, and I've been in the industry now for 3 years. I just had my 3-year anniversary at Slack last week. So I highly, I think. You can't expect everyone's going to have different opinions, and people are busy. So if they're not going to mentor you, they'll tell you. But I don't think you should be afraid to ask for help, and I think that it's all about paying it forward at the end of the day too. We're all here through a lot of grit and hard work, and also the help of other people. I don't think any of us would be on this stage right now if we didn't have other people helping us. So anyway, that being said, another questions? Yes.
Great. So my question is about education before or maybe after you get into the coding bootcamp. Is it really important for you to get a degree before you finish the coding bootcamp, or is this in lieu of, you do the coding bootcamp instead of going to a program for any kind of degree?
Thank you. Yes.
I think that's a fantastic question. I wanted to clarify, are you asking in relation to your job potentials and outcomes, or just generally whether or not you should get the foundational education beforehand? Job potential, yeah. So It's definitely true that many companies still require a bachelor's degree when they're hiring. Now, that's not necessarily a bachelor's degree in STEM, but they do have a requirement for a bachelor's degree. That is slowly changing. And I've seen many folks graduate from boot camps without a degree who have still been able to get a job. But it is often more challenging to create your narrative around why you're qualified for the position if you don't have the degree. That's just what I've seen over the years. So it's definitely possible, but just be prepared to have a really, really strong narrative if you don't have the degree, and make sure that you have really, really great mentorship and career coaching to help you find those roles that don't require the degree, because they're out there, but they're harder to find.
Thank you. So I had a friend who went through a coding camp, and then she was mentioning like there were only like 3 girls in her cohort, maybe like 5, and then like 4 dropped out after like 4 weeks. So I just want to know like why that's the case. And I think someone mentioned this also, like what, just like from your experience, like why some people just drop out, and what's your advice? Thank you.
Well, App Academy has a thing where if you fail 2 assessments, the second assessment you're given a chance to take a retake at lunch. And if you fail that retake, you are removed from the program. Unfortunately, my cohort had about 63 to 65 people. I'm always foggy on this number, but I think we had about 12 girls, and we ended up with about 6 or 5. And I don't think that has anything to do with like their ability to work or anything. It's just, I guess I can't really say. Like I don't like personally. Like I really like. I think it's hard being in a room full of like men, and like being in a world where like you're like everyone. Is it right brain or left brain? That's like left brain is like the logical one, right? So like we live in a world where like men were given, you know, toys that had to do with like logic and math, and like women were given toys that had to do with like you know, dolls and like makeup and stuff. And I think like very unfortunate that that is the case. Hopefully we can change that soon. But I think that like it has a lot to do with like your confidence and like thinking like, oh man, like being intimidated by being in a room full of men. I'm in a team right now where my team is entirely men. I'm the only female on my team, and it is very intimidating. Like you sit there and you're just kind of like, oh crap, like what have I gotten myself into? But it's really knowing that like learning how to learn, someone mentioned this earlier, is that you gotta change your relationship with your brain. Your brain will tell you like, you know, this is all you've experienced in your past. Like you've done things where, you know, you've grown up, you like colored things, you played with dolls, you never played with like engineering or logic. Like you can't do this. That's your brain telling you these things, but your brain is not the master of you, it's a tool. So you gotta conquer all of that, like years of like society just telling you what you can and cannot do, and you have to like overcome, and there's a lot more for women to overcome in this industry than there are for men. So, I mean, maybe it's not doing so well for women, but I know for like cohorts after, there have been much higher rates of women in our cohorts at App Academy, and I think there's been higher retention rate. It really depends on the individual, and there's no like specific trend that I can point towards, but there is a lot more that we have to overcome, and so it's harder.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to give a somewhat different perspective because Hackbright is all women, and so it was like 100% start to finish. And I think there were also, so like, that's one thing that's definitely true, like being taught that you can't do something makes it harder to actually do it. But also there are like some logistical and cultural things that can contribute to like making it easier. So there were like a bunch of moms at Hackbright, and I would like carpool in one of their minivans, and the program started at 10 so that she could drop her kids off at work and then get there on time. And so like there are some, like the structure of the program I think makes a difference. And then they also had things like Feelings Fridays, which like feels entirely too girly to me, but then like when I'm feeling like I can't do it in week 12, I like actually kind of need to be able to cry and not feel embarrassed. So I think different boot camps have sort of different flavors, and it's worth figuring out what's a good fit for you.
Totally. Thank you, guys. Sorry, we unfortunately, I don't think we have any more time for questions? But the good news is,
so your question will be able to be answered if you want to stick around, because we're actually going to break everyone off into small groups if you want to stay. Where basically the leader of a small group called Peer Circle will be one of these panelists and will be able to answer your questions sort of like more rapid fire in a small group. So that concludes the formal panel, but if anyone who is interested wants to be in a small group, you can essentially start filling in these tables over here, and we'll get you all set up for the next 30 minutes roughly to talk in a small group. And if you're not interested in that, feel free to head on out or get some more wine or something. But thank you, everyone. This is a great panel.
thank you, yay.